Welcome everyone to the on-farm pepper breeding webinar. We are August 19th, it's 1 p.m. Bienvenue aujourd'hui au webinaire sur la sélection et la production de semences de poivrons et de piments. On est aujourd'hui le 19 août. I will start today by a brief land acknowledgement. My name is Hugo. I'm zooming in here from Jojage, Montreal, home of the Gangahaga Mohawk people, members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and keepers of the Eastern Door. The Haudenosaunee have cultivated for generations this land, known today as Southern Quebec, Ontario, where Rebecca is joining us, and upstate New York, where Michael is located. Je débute ici en reconnaissant que je suis situé sur un territoire autochtone, lequel n'a jamais été cédé, et que la nation Gangahaga demeure gardien de ces terres. Nous souhaitons aussi partager notre reconnaissance aux peuples et aux cultures et aux terres d'Amérique centrale et d'Amérique du Sud qui se sont imbriqués il y a plus de 6000 ans dans un processus de coévolution pour domestiquer les poivrons et les piments qu'on apprécie tant et avec lesquels on travaille aujourd'hui. Finally, we're particularly thankful to the people, the crop ancestors, and the lands in South and Central America who first came together over 6,000 years ago in a coevolutionary process that gave rise to the pepper's domestication that we continue to enjoy and work with today. Just a few housekeeping items. In terms of language, feel comfortable to speak your mother tongue language and ask questions in your mother tongue language. That's French or English. Will be the first. Each time we'll be speaking English. The slides will be in French, and when speakers are speaking in French, the slides will be in English. There'll be a dedicated time for questions in the discussion period. So we'll first have a few introductory slides to give some context on varietal selection for peppers, both sweet and hot peppers. After that, we'll invite Annie, Dan, David, and Francis to share their some updates on their on-farm breeding projects. And finally, we'll invite Michael for a conversation and a question and answer period. During the discussion period, we'll try to regroup questions based on themes. And we really hope to really encourage people to ask questions by writing or verbally. On va d'abord faire quelques slides, quelques diapositives d'introduction sur la sélection de variétés de piments et de poivrons. Ensuite, on va faire le tour de plusieurs projets de sélection à la ferme avec Annie, Daniel, David et Francis. Et ensuite, on va garder un moment dédié à un échange, des discussions et des questions avec Michael, qui nous rejoint de Cornell. Welcome, Michael. We're very excited to have you here today.
Excited to be here. I would normally be about now hanging out with some of you in person. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to connect so we don't miss out entirely on the season. So thank you so much for including me.
Thanks for joining, Michael. So, une brève introduction sur la sélection de variétés de piments. On allé chercher quelques références disponibles. So, this is just a few brief introductory slides on variety selection. Here we have some results from bell pepper results through CANOVI from last year. And there was just 5 farmers that participated across Canada, but we see some although the results are pretty similar from one variety to another, it's interesting to see that there's some varieties that farmers would like to grow again versus varieties that they would be less tempted to grow in the following years. This is a chart representing queries from gardeners on the Seed Finder, le localisateur de semences écologiques, around peppers. So you'll find some popular varieties that gardeners like to buy, and it's this information is from 2017 to 2020. In 2018, we did a survey of ecological and organic farmers across Canada, and some of the key traits that were emphasized were yield, eating quality, and earliness. Au Québec, on a aussi fait un sondage, un questionnaire similaire, puis la pourriture apicale, bottom rot disease, était un facteur important de sélection. Vous voyez, you can see here a few commercial varieties: Stocky Red Roaster, Carmen Ace, King of the North, and Lipstick, that farmers have highlighted as key varieties. This is a series of varieties and comments and observations that were collected over 6 years from different farmer-to-farmer workshops in Quebec, and from the RGME listserv, which has over 800 small-scale farming operations contributing. And what's interesting here is just to see the market classes. We can go back to this later on. Hot peppers, corno, shepherd peppers, bell peppers, and miniature peppers. We can always go back to this later on. Je vais inviter Isabelle. Isabelle did a tasting last year at the Botanical Garden. Isabelle, can you give us a bit of a highlight of this variety tasting?
Isabelle, you're muted. Your microphone.
Mute.
Voilà.
Yes. Hi. I will try in English. We had 72 cultivar last September. We tasted 50 because we start with the sweet pepper until the strongest, and we stop at 50 because it was too much hot. Each had a bar to rate the salty, the sweet, bitter, umami taste, and to vote for their favorites. Obviously, all were very tasty, often fruity, a real treat. Three favorite. I put it here 13 choice that la majorité des gens ont voté pour ces cultivars-là. 5 of them were very like the top for la saveur, for the taste. So 3 of them are like sweet pepper, 0.3 on the scale, Scoville scale, and it's from Quinense species. So Roulette, it's F1, who won the All-America selection in 2018. For the fruity green apple, raspberry, a mix of fruit, and very smoky. And the second one, Habanada. I think it's you that you create in Cornell University this paper, Michael? No? for the floral, tropical, fruity, and the beautiful peach color. Arroz con pollo in Spanish. It's I think it's an old variety, traditional variety from Cuba. It was very interesting. And the two other ones from Bacatun species, also sweet pepper, the I Delight, and the Mad Hatter was very good. And I have all the evaluation. If you are interested to have the result, I can share with you.
Merci Isabelle. Thanks Isabelle. It was a really great event, and it's really nice to see the botanical garden getting involved in doing variety tastings. Several chefs were there and farmers, and so it was a really successful event. I'll now turn towards some of the farmers that are doing on-farm breeding, starting with Annie, if she's here. Anybody from the Seedworks, the plant breeding club, wants to join and share some of their breeding work with the peppers?
Hi, yeah, Annie's here. I'm here, and Kathy as well from Seedworks is here.
Thanks for joining, Annie. Thanks for joining, Catherine.
Nice to see everybody.
Okay, well, so the Southern Ontario Pepper Project, we basically started, there's 4 of us, I think originally 4 different farms that started in the eastern and southern parts of the province. And we had the goal of breeding a blocky red pepper that would ripen earlier than what was on the market at the time. And so we started off with a cross that Rachel Haltengren had made in Michael Mazourek's program at Cornell. And that cross was a cross between 2 commercial varieties, so Aristotle and Ace. And they had done the trials for the blockiest pepper, which was Aristotle, and also the earliest ripening red pepper, which was Ace. So it just kind of happened at the right time that they had just made the cross and they had a bit of extra seed they could share with us. And so the 4 of us on 4 different farms, I think started that first year, this was in 2016, with about 140 plants or something like that. And so we planted those out, each in our different fields and in different parts of the province. And we started to make selections based on earliness of ripening, some yields, but also the blocky shape. And that first year, we saw a lot of variability. The plants, all different statures of plants, leaf coverage, fruit shape, fruit color, you name it. There's all kinds of diversity in there. There's a lot of yellow, yeah, a lot of yellow coming out of there, coming from one of the original parents that created one of the hybrids that was started with. And so, but we did see definitely some plants ripening fruit a lot earlier, so we would flag those off and save seed from them. And this is all an open population, so we let the pollen intermingle amongst the population itself. And we saved the seed from the earliest, blockiest pepper that year, all 4 of us. And then we amalgamated those seeds in a bag and shook them up and then redispersed them amongst the 4 farms, and did that again the second year. And in the second year, we also decided that we wanted to continue on with this diverse population and continue improving it slowly but surely over the years and let it open pollinate amongst itself. But at the same time, we also wanted to try to create sort of inbred lines that could be a little bit more uniform for market gardeners that needed that. And so we selected some of our best red pepper plants that would ripen the fruit the earliest, and also had the blockiest shape. And at the same time, there was some really nice early ripening yellow peppers coming out of the population. So we thought we might as well, try to make a line of inbred yellow peppers as well. So then our project kind of became two lines and a population to maintain. And so some of us, the year after that, all of us grew the open population again. And again, every year, always selecting for the earliest, most blockiest peppers. And then we also, some of us also were able to segregate the populations, the red line and the yellow line on our farms, and kind of continue to inbreed them. And how we did that is by covering them. And so we wouldn't let any insects in there. And so making sure that the pepper plants would self-pollinate themselves, and then we'd pick the best plants. Well, the first year we picked the best plants out of that, and then kind of made familial lines, and kept, I think in both lines there was one or two standout lines that we kept and continued to inbreed those lines. And I think it was in the second, maybe third year. Yeah, I think it was the third year of the open population breeding, the diverse line, that I had the opportunity to take some of our peppers along with, I think it was 9 other varieties of red pepper. I was doing a red pepper trial on the farm at the same time. And so I took fruits from all the different red peppers, sweet peppers, to the market and had a blind taste test that day. And our breeding line, the diverse line, came out ahead by a long shot, and for people's preferences in terms of flavor of those peppers, which was really exciting, because that's another trait that we are selecting for, to make sure that the flavor is really good. So on this on the top right here on your screen, you could see this. So just a snapshot of the two parents on the outside, Aristotle and Ace, and then our line, an example of our line in between. So it's ripening here. You can't see that it's necessarily earlier than Ace, but it's as early because it's definitely earlier than Aristotle, and a little bit blockier than Ace, which is basically what we're going for. Anyone else want to? I think Greta and Kim are on the line, and if anyone else wants to jump in and add anything. So at this point, we do have plans to harvest as many of the open pollinated ones, the open pollinated mass selected line this summer from the 3 farms, and to be able to release the seed of this the diverse population. So to make it accessible to gardeners and farmers who want to try it, we think it's a really robust population. It's been through droughts without irrigation. It's been through some hail and also some wet weather. So we think it's pretty robust, and it's going to keep getting better. But we figure it's time to release it and let other people see what they think. And on that note too, we have, there's 2 farmers in Ontario right now that are doing a trial, a red pepper trial, with some of our SeedWorks mass selected population in there too. So we will have some of those results to share with everybody. And so far it's looking like the mass selected pepper has produced fruit and is starting to ripen ahead of the other ones, which is exciting.
Thank you, Annie. That's really encouraging results. I had one question that that Rebecca answered on whether you would consider this land race. I will now turn towards our, and by the way, the picture on the bottom left, it's such a, what a number of peppers you have here on that plant. It's quite a high yielding plant. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's a photo from Kim.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So let's turn towards Dan Brisebois, who's in not far from Ontario, in Les Cèdres, très proche de Montréal. Daniel, je tourne le slide. À toi.
All right, so hi, I'm Dan from Tournesol Farm. The first project I'm going to present is our carrot bomb project. So this began in some of our early years. So we started in 2005, and I'm not sure what year we first grew it, but we grew some Bulgarian carrot peppers that we'd actually bought from Fedco. And they're a fantastic pepper, really nice and early. But it's a spice. It's like kind of like a cayenne, a little bit shorter, fairly thin walls. Orange, like a 40,000 or so, 40,000 Scoville. And they were great. And there was one that was different. So this is something that was actually crossed up somewhere else. And so I saved the seed, like I do whenever anything's different. And I'm not sure about the early generations, but as far as my photo archive goes, I have some F3 seeds in 2011, which is what I shared here. I think this is some of the earliest selections I have. That I have records of, and you can see that there's all kinds of diversity, and I'm not totally sure what that F1 looked like, but by the F3 there was a lot of different stuff, and this is some like specific phenotypes that were coming out of it. At that point, I really liked the smaller round ones. What I actually was really trying to get at first was like a small mini bell pepper, but it just kept segregating and it wouldn't stabilize, so I gave up at one point. But I kept a couple lines going, some that were longer and then one that was round. And the round one is what I've really settled on. And so this has been released for 4 or 5 years now. We like it. And I can say a couple things about the process. I've learned a lot about plant breeding as we go along, such as, how to number things. Here I was trying to figure out different stuff. I had all kinds of selections and then sub-selections of selections. And so I've gotten a better accession tracking system from talking to other breeders. And then also what I was actually looking at. So here's the fruits. And this is what I was really looking at first, what the fruits were like. And one of the things that happened after going to, I think it was the Patchwork Farm or Patchwork Gardens, when Michael Mazourek was up, and kind of in the early years of this bell pepper project that Annie was talking about, we talked a lot about selection. I remember going back and looking at my own selections like the next day and realizing that I'd really been focusing only on the fruit. And I had early fruit, I had heavy yield, I had really great color, and the plants looked miserable. And they were really bushy and really horrible plants. And suddenly I thought maybe this is actually a garbage variety, despite having good plants and good fruit. So then I kind of selected more rigorously within that the stuff that I liked better. And within 1 year, the plants were pretty different. And within 2 or 3 years, the plants were looking a lot better. So it's just interesting to see what you can select. And at this point, I don't have that many lines going. I pretty much have one population that I'm maintaining that I've been in for a few years. So I kind of consider this one finished at this point, though it's always hard to quit refining. So that's my carrot bomb. And then this is another project that also began randomly. With some stuff we do, like with other species, not peppers, we do intentionally cross different things to get stuff. But with things that require manual pollination, like peppers or tomatoes or other stuff, we just look for chance things and grow them out. And so this was a Scotch bonnet we were growing for a couple of years. What we noticed 1 year was that there were a bunch of, so I was growing these Scotch bonnets in isolation from other Chinense, but we got a bunch of different fruit. I got to like 30% of the plants were crossed up, and I realized that they had been crossing with sweet peppers, possibly with Carmen and Escamillo, or maybe Gatherer's Gold, something like that, because they were being grown in a tunnel. And I was just thought that, I was keeping them safe from Chinense. And I should have known better because I've actually seen this before, but I was just kind of assumed that it wasn't going to happen. And so we had a few off types that came out. So I saved the seed from the off types and I grew them. So I grew them. I got the F2 generation last year. And that's what you see right here on the right is I grew about 100 plants, and the 100 plants all looked really, really different. And there was a range of stuff from mild and not hot to really hot. So we had to taste each plant to see whether it was spicy or not, which is always the best part of the project. And then kind of choose the way they look. And one of the things that was exciting initially was there was one that was really mild, and it was one of the sweetest peppers I ever tasted, and it was really, really delicious. It was a light, pale, long one. But when I cut into it, I realized there was no seed. And I don't know if it's because of the cross of the Chidense annum or what specifically, but we noticed that the most spiciest and some of the sweetest both didn't have seed in them. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. So I'm growing that other stuff out this year, and I'm hoping I find something really wonderful. I'm not sure where this is going to go. There's a couple shapes I like, but I think it's going to be a combination of shape and flavor and heat level. And hopefully I get some wines that are mild and some wines that are spicy. And so that's my Scotch Bonnet remix.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm gonna now turn towards Francis. Francis, tu veux faire ça en français? Alors, Francis.
Oui, en français, c'est facile. Bonjour tout le monde. Ça va être plus facile pour moi. Dans le fond, moi, je suis encore au stade un peu embryonnaire. J'étais depuis 2017 là, que j'ai commencé à m'intéresser au piment fort. Mes projets principaux, c'est, dans le fond, je m'intéresse beaucoup aux hybrides au marché du hobby. J'essaie de principalement partir de semences F2 dans le Caspicum chinense. Puis après ça, je fais de la recherche un peu de phénotype. Là, puis j'explore un peu les variations là, des nouveaux hybrides, là, dans le fond. Puis après qu'est-ce que je fais, c'est que je vais sélectionner les phénotypes qui m'intéressent, les phénotypes principalement destinés au marché du hobby pour l'instant, dans le super hot. C'est ça. Puis j'ai un autre volet, là, dans le fond, qui j'essaie de cultiver des variétés moins communes. Je m'intéresse énormément à beaucoup de recherches à trouver des petites perles moins connues un peu. On va chercher dans des seed banks un peu qu'est-ce qui est. Puis dans le fond, moi, je les amène au Québec. Je les cultive. Après, des fois, ça le rend à terme, des fois, ça ne le rend pas à terme. On regarde un peu où est-ce que le climat québécois peut aller dans la culture. Là. Jusqu'à date, j'ai un petit peu de misère à rendre certains bacatums. Les chinennes, ça c'est bien, mais les bacatums sont un petit peu plus difficiles, certaines variétés au Québec. C'est ça. Puis depuis quelques années, depuis 2 ans déjà, j'ai fait des tests en 2018. Je fais un peu d'hybridation. Mon but, c'est de faire un piment qui est productif au Québec, qui essaie de jumeler le goût un peu, parce que dans les piments un petit peu moins connus, des trucs qui m'intéressent beaucoup aux chinennes du Brésil, il y a vraiment des affaires qui sont bons, qui sont très délicieuses. Fait que j'essaie un peu d'incorporer des super hot et d'un goût délicieux pour les mettre ensemble. Jouer un peu aussi sur le look du piment, qui soit esthétique. Il y a de jouer avec les couleurs, les formes, puis toujours en partant du principe qu'il faut qu'il se cultive au Québec, puis il faut qu'il soit très bon. Il faut qu'il passe le test du goût là, pour la deuxième sélection, dans le fond. Donc, c'est ça. Là, c'est ça. Là, je vous présente un projet que j'ai découvert en 2018 dans mon jardin, dans le fond, à partir de semences F2, qui est vraiment mon stade qui est préféré. Dans le fond, les semences F2, c'est là que le melting pot un peu de génétique est activé. J'ai acheté les semences en 2017 à Enrico Ley, qui est un piment qui était sommairement assez régulier, là, sans plus. Quand j'ai poussé en 2018 dans mon jardin, où j'ai eu 4 fruits, 4 variations différentes, un rouge, un chocolat, un couleur moutarde avec un petit peu d'anthocyanine, puis j'ai eu celui que j'ai appelé le Nice Good Breakfast, dans le fond, qui est principalement destiné au marché du hobby, un peu là, du piment fort. C'est un piment à couleur, dans le fond, il y a la chair chocolat, puis il reste une grosse dose d'anthocyanine dedans. Il ne change presque pas de couleur entre les 2 stades de maturation. Fait que, il est quand même assez difficile à cultiver. Au niveau goût, c'est un piment qui qui est difficile à comparer, très, très fort, beaucoup de capsaïcine, mais avec avec le combo couleur chocolat et anthocyane au goût, c'est difficile de le comparer à un autre piment. C'est pour ça que moi, j'ai fait une sélection en 2018. En 2019, j'ai cultivé 5 plants. Je suis encore à petite échelle, assez embryonnaire, là, je dirais. J'ai gardé celui qui se correspondait. J'ai été capable de reproduire le phénotype, un petit peu différent, mais les couleurs sont restées et tout. J'ai discarté les 4 autres phénotypes là, qui ne m'intéressaient pas. Présentement, il est en cours de croissance. Principalement, là, cette année, qu'est-ce que je vais faire, c'est que j'ai envoyé à plusieurs amis un peu partout, puis je vais resélectionner le plus beau dans ceux que j'ai envoyés. C'est un projet qui est un peu mutuel dans la communauté là, en ce moment, que j'ai libéré. Donc, c'est ça.
Merci, Francis.
C'est ce qui conclut un peu mon présent.
So Francis gave an overview of some of his new seed company that's specializing in hobby pepper production for hobby farmers and growers, and he's really looking for unique, uncommon varieties. And this is an example of a Chinense pepper that he's stabilizing. Let's go ahead with David Croteau, who has a sauce making company and is also doing some selection. David, à toi la parole.
Oui, bonjour à tous. C'est moi, David Croteau, propriétaire avec ma conjointe du domaine Britannia Mills. On est situé au Québec, près de Saint-Hyacinthe, donc en Montérégie. C'est dans la section qui est une des meilleures sections au Québec là, pour faire de l'agriculture. Les terres sont belles, on a plus de chaleur là, que beaucoup de place. Donc, moi, en tant que passionné depuis plusieurs années là, des piments forts, à un moment donné, on commence tout le monde avec des jalapenos, puis première année, 2-3 petits plants sur le patio, puis on regarde ça aller, puis c'est le fun, puis tout d'un coup, qu'est-ce qu'il y a d'autre? Comme là, on se met à regarder sur Internet les autres variétés qu'il y a. Là. C'est là qu'on découvre, mettons, des piments plus forts, puis d'autres variétés que tu ne trouves pas dans les pépinières ou à des places comme ça. Donc, moi, ça a commencé comme ça. On commence avec les jalapenos, on découvre les cayennes, c'est plus fort, c'est complètement un autre goût, c'est un autre rendement, tout est différent. Puis là, on se met à regarder, puis tout le monde passe par le search engine, puis ils cherchent tout, le plus fort au monde, c'est quoi? Là? Ça fait que là, on arrive tout le temps dans des choses comme le Ghost, les Scorpions. Là, à cette heure, maintenant, il y a le Carolina Reaper, puis il y a même des variétés qui sont encore mythologiques, comme on peut dire, comme des choses comme le Pepper X ou le Dragon Breath. Mais, bref, moi, ça a commencé... quand j'ai commencé vraiment à m'intéresser aux piments forts et extra forts, le plus fort, c'était le Ghost. Autour du Ghost, il y avait aussi les 7 potes qui commençaient à sortir. Donc... là, on commence, on regarde, on essaye de se trouver des graines. C'est pas évident. À cette époque-là, là, ça retourne, là, on retourne vers 12, 13, 14 ans, là, facilement. Là. Donc, c'est là qu'on cherche des graines. On réussit à avoir, mettons, du 7 pot. On trouve des graines de Ghost. Puis, tout d'un coup, on dit, hey, moi, je suis très autodidacte. Je lis beaucoup. Donc, j'ai aussi regardé comment ça se faisait des croisements. Puis, j'ai lu beaucoup sur les piments, les familles, les variétés, tout ça. Donc, j'ai dit, je vais en essayer un. Je vais essayer de faire un croisement pour voir qu'est-ce que ça donne. T'sais. Puis ça, c'est mon croisement actuellement est rendu F11. Donc, ça fait au moins 11 ans là, qu'à chaque année, il y avait la resélection et tout ça. Donc, mon croisement initial, c'est un bout de Jolokia couleur chocolat, brun, là, comme on voit dans la photo en bas, dans le coin à gauche, j'ai fait une petite équation, là, un bout de jolokia avec un 7-pot jaune. Ça m'a donné mon piment que j'ai appelé le Hell Carrot. Parce qu'il a la forme d'une carotte. Il a comme la longueur du ghost, mais il est venu plus étroit. Les premières versions, il était un petit peu plus grosse, mais là, actuellement, moi, je le travaille pour qu'il soit de la forme qu'il a là, puis qu'il est très stable. C'est sûr que des fois, j'isole pas tout dans le champ, parce que pour ma production, moi, je veux du volume, puis je ne suis pas en train de tout le temps isoler tous mes plants. Donc, des fois, j'ai quand même des surprises au champ, puis je me garde des plants aussi en isolation pour garder ma pureté. Comme on peut voir dans la photo dans le coin en bas à droite, ça, c'est le plant. Il y a de l'air de ça. Le piment, quand il n'est pas mûr, là, il est comme crème. Ça ressemble un peu à la couleur des hot wax ou des piments bananes. Un petit jaune pâle. Puis quand la couleur commence à changer, là, on le voit, là, il s'en va d'une couleur qui est rouille. Donc, ça, c'est très intéressant. C'est un piment, c'est extrêmement fort. Là. On est dans les 1,x millions. Là. Je ne l'ai jamais fait tester encore, mais j'ai un ami là, qui mange des piments extrêmes. Là, puis ça le brasse un petit peu. Là. Ça lui donne un peu de chaleur. Donc, c'est intéressant de ce côté-là. Côté goût, c'est très fruité, c'est sucré, même si la force est extrême. Là. Certains vont juste arrêter à la force, mais il y a quand même un bon goût en arrière de ça. Là. Donc, ça, c'est le genre de piment là, que j'aime ça travailler avec. Puis que je suis pas mal le seul qui l'a. J'ai pas, il y a eu des sous-souches que j'avais distribuées un petit peu dans le temps, mais ils n'ont pas resté comme celle-là. Là. Puis moi, je travaille avec celle-là, puis je garde un petit peu ma génétique là, pour l'instant, parce que quand je la transforme en sauce, je suis le seul qui va aller chercher ce goût-là pour mes produits. Donc, c'est ça. C'est un travail en continu. Et souvent, là, ça, c'est une des sortes que je travaille dessus. J'ai plusieurs autres variétés maintenant très intéressantes. Puis souvent, c'est les extrêmes là, que je travaille dessus. Là. Souvent, c'est très difficile d'avoir un extrême qui est bon, qui n'est pas trop amer ou floral, avec quand même une bonne production au plant puis qui se rend à terme. Ça, c'est tout le temps le défi. Mon L Carrot, il faut commencer très tôt, puis il faut bien l'entretenir là, si on veut être capable d'en récolter une bonne partie du plant, là, étant donné que l'hiver arrive vite. Quand on est rendu à la fin septembre, là, les derniers jours, là, ils commencent à être très, très importants. Cette année, je vais essayer à cet automne, précisément, de mettre des couvertures flottantes pour garder la chaleur, pour essayer de maximiser là, la finale de la saison, parce que il y a beaucoup de fois là, qu'on jette, on ne peut pas récolter la majorité des piments là, dans le haut du plant. Là. Donc, là, je vais essayer cette année de mettre tout ce que je peux de mon côté pour garder ma chaleur puis augmenter mon taux de maturité dans mes plants. Éventuellement, il va y avoir des serres puis des moyens comme ça pour déjouer le froid, mais je ne suis pas rendu à ce moment-là. C'est surtout en champ que je cultive, donc c'est ça. C'est un de mes petits bébés là, que je trouve super, puis un petit look intéressant. Là.
Merci, David. So David and Francis are recent encounters for me. They are both pillars in the hot pepper community in Quebec, and they just presented 2 of their extra hot pepper breeding projects where they try to combine that with good taste, early maturity, although maturity can be a challenge. And what's great for David is that he has this unreleased pepper variety that he has exclusivity for his hot sauces. So thank you, Annie, Catherine, Daniel, David, and Francis for your brief presentations and staying on time. We have now around 45 minutes for conversations with Michael Michael Mazourek from Cornell University. Several of you can call Michael a good friend and have had the chance to meet him over several conferences and workshops in Ontario and in the US. He's also one of the founders of the Row 7 Seed Company. His focus is also on peas and cucurbits, and some of his research interest is really around flavor innovations and plant genetics. So, Michael, I have here a bunch of different themes we can talk about, but why don't you go ahead, share some of your enthusiasm and inspirations over the past few years, and perhaps some comments over the projects that were presented earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks. And again, it's just so cool to be here. I'd otherwise normally be seeing you guys at seeing you folks at conferences and in person in the fields this summer. So thank you for letting me be a guest here as I've gotten to know everybody. There's maybe a lot I would have led with sharing in the past, but I think it's feeling fun just to be part of the group now. So a little awkward to have my name up there, but I feel like I'm part of the group, and it's been a fantastic feeling. So thanks, and so I'm just tickled to be here. There's a lot of what I do. It's split between two areas, and I think looking at what Annie presented, and Isabella and David and Francis, I think that kind of spans the sorts of things I'm really interested in, where one, it's very much what are the needs out there. Oh, and Dan, finding interesting things in the crosses for sure. But it's looking at, like, what do people need, and what are people having gaps, and how can we, this is work we did with Rachel Haltengren, that's here, actually led a bunch of it, which was how to calibrate, how to figure out what people need from us that they are not getting from other plant breeders, and how to help serve them, like where are the underserved communities and how to help. And the bell pepper project, Rachel developed some really cool peppers we've continued with, and it's kind of in parallel to what Annie presented on with the whole group of Kim and Rebecca and Kathy and Greta, and pardon if I forgot one. But so that's a really kind of need-based thing. It's going to develop the pepper like my kids are going to love. My mom is going to like to slice up for my kids, and there's a need for that. And it's really cool to see them, that project. It's going in such a great way that it's doing fine in their hands, probably maybe better than in my hands, which is really awesome, right? We need more people working on all these things in different areas, and so it's cool to be able to kind of see what they're working on through the progress. So that's awesome. Peppers are my love. I have done a lot in squash. I enjoy working on squash, but there's something for me. Like Ken Green did an exercise at an OSA conference, probably done it further, about like getting in touch with what vegetables mean something to you and where you're from and what your connection is. And I was sitting there and I'm like, man, this is just not my style. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and get all emotional about a vegetable. Come on. And I was just kind of thinking about both my trips to New Mexico, as you drive through these fields of peppers, past these fields. Don't drive through the fields. The farmers get really upset, right? So you drive past the fields, and you just have these plants that are baking in the sun. They're drying right on the plant, and it just smells marvelous just going past through the window down. And I love it there, and trying to think about why I love it there. And it's probably my roots and my Czech heritage, where like there's a lot of peppers that are really important to that cuisine, and so we're back to those in a big way. And well, my PhD was in capsaicin and how peppers get hot, and about ricotta chilies and how they're hot in very different ways, and sometimes very mean ways, and sometimes very nice ways. The community I just rediscovered and became a part of and have been sampling all these seeds from that we're remixing is exactly the things that like David and Francis were sharing. And there's all these chinenses that people have been working on that I didn't know they were working on, and it's so amazing, like all this diversity they found or created. And yeah, it's that Major Pain by Yaki Blue. That cross is in our greenhouse. Pink Tiger. There's like all these awesome peppers out there that are, they're just like there's a joy, right? So we're working on ones that we can eat, and so survive eating. I like hot peppers. I can't make it all the way through a habanero. I confess, right? It doesn't mean I love them. My mind does. My body is still second guessing. Yeah, and along the way, I think there's things like Dan was sharing about some of the pepper crosses and the isolations where, as we've done crosses between species, I love doing crosses between species, really mixing up genetics. Yeah, so Dan, exactly what you were sharing about the way you see about the pepper seed yield and how it messes up fruit development and kind of what that means for what makes seed or what doesn't. And your conclusions, yeah, I mean, that's exactly the same stuff I drew by trial and error here. So I don't know. Yeah, we can go a bunch of directions. The prompts are gone, but I guess it's mostly just I feel really connected to this group, so it's cool, and to meet more people. This is fun. I think as we talk about some of the prompts and things and some of the projects, some of us have had the chance to do together. Two of the big things I think that I'm thinking about, don't remember if they're on the list, is often in plant breeding, we like plan for the process, plan for the struggle of creating something. We seldom think about like what it's going to look at the finish line when you're there and you've created it, and then what do you do with it? And who's participated in it? How do you acknowledge it? How do you work together? And along the way, when you see something very much like you were working on, that you told someone you were working on, also show up at the finish line at or about the same time. How do you feel about that? It becomes a very personal, emotional thing as you've invested in like your creation. So those are all things I think it's interesting to think about or talk about. And the other is, I think I've talked to a few of you over the years about me trying to figure out like Aussie. And so Rachel, we've had a lot of conversations, Annie and Rebecca. And I think there's a lot of stuff in Aussies where I've always loved the spirit of it. And I think now there's great hope for them to formalize the language, write what they mean and mean what they write, and kind of clarify the pledge. And so I'm very excited to think about most of my Cornell program going straight into Aussie. We also do a bunch of stuff in my home breeding now outside. That's a whole other story. So anyway, so there's that's some background, some things to share about pepper. I'll put some of them in the chat here, just in case you haven't had the resources before. The first, so everybody can just have it, it's there in the chat. It's a link to the pepper gene list. It's out of date and needs updating. There's a bunch in the community probably looking to me to update it. I'm having a blast with my kids. I think as Rachel can relate. They're not joining me in the Zoom, but they often do. I'm probably not going to be the one to do it anytime soon. It doesn't have some of the coolest new stuff like David and Francis are working about, where it's like, if you look, it's probably a homeotic gene that makes like those super hot so hot. I'd love to talk about that if you want. Another one is a pollination guide to peppers and actually a whole bunch of other vegetables. This was created by Hannah Sweetgarden. And it's just a fantastic resource. It's Ani Organic. It's free to connect. I didn't quite realize it at the time, but I've decided it's probably good. So it has all my tips and tricks about crossing with peppers, ones I didn't not realize. Oops, I was sharing to the world when she interviewed me. It was probably good. So just kind of the tips and tricks to doing pollinations, as we do Chinense pollinations and Bacatum pollinations and wild Antium pollinations are all weird. And if you don't have great depth perception, there's some tricks they're in there. The last one that I didn't think to have it ready to post, but I have probably not seen any of you there before, but it is one of the best conferences we have in the U.S. It's moved to South America a couple times. I'll put it in the chat now. The last, make sure it goes to everybody. International Pepper Conference. So it's all the people working on pepper. It's kind of a global community. And it's a lot of like the company and academic plant breeders, but the coolest stuff is often by the people that are freelancing or independent. And so that's awesome. Some rad stuff. Anyway, so I've rambled a bit. Those of you that know me know that happens. Yeah, anyway. I'm excited to chat with you all, connect with you all, see you all. So I'll stop rambling and let Hugo take back over.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the introduction and some of the resources you shared. I am curious if there's anybody in the room who wants to ask Michael or some of the growers who presented some of their burning questions.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
My name is Simon. I'm from North Carolina. I'm studying plant genetics, work with sweet potato. Just a quick question. Why don't we see Bacatum in the supermarket?
It's different. Bacatum is amazing for those of you that haven't worked with Bacatums. They're a species of pepper that has limited crossing with all the others. It can cross, it's tricky, you can do it. Chinense is one of the easiest first crosses, Chinense or Tabasco frutescens. All the, I think Francis, had some cool ahi fantasies mixed into his stuff. Those are beautiful. All the Bacatums share in common, almost all of them, you can identify them as on the petals. They have, it looks like a henna tattoo of a feather on every petal. Not every Bacatum has it, but almost everyone. They're all really crispy and they have a cool crunch. Some are early, a lot of them are super late. One of the first things I did when I was on the faculty at Cornell is we wanted to, there's a lot of peppers that were in our USDA collection that were infected with the virus. The seed-borne virus is a nasty one. It's like tobacco mosaic, only mild, so pepper mild model virus. The plants are just generally underperformed. Sometimes you can see a foliar symptom. Any TMV, tobacco mosaic test, we like to use these AgBia test strips, will detect it. Even though it's in that family. And so it's good to, if you're doing pepper, it's good to spot check. So we cleaned that up. We grew all the Bacatums the USDA had. They don't have Ahi Fantasy White. They did have some of the progenitors to Mad Hatter. So these kombuchi peppers that are in there. It's a subspecies of Bacatum. But, it's, we tend to see bell peppers. And because we eat the tip of the iceberg of what's available for diversity and what we should be eating. So Bacatums are amazing. Most of them are blazingly hot. There's a few like Mad Hatter, the progenitors of that we found that are not spicy. Yep. Yeah. But bacotums are rad. And so in general, anything called ahi is going to be a bacotum. Ahi means pepper. So it's not super specific, but they tend to go hand in hand. And otherwise, one of the things that we spend a while doing is kind of thinking about what we're going to create. So some of the paintings on the wall behind me, we have an art student in the program, Ruby, and she, Dialuzia Stravka, and so she works on helping us conceptualize like what we're going to create. I had this vision for this beautiful red, kind of like Carmen, Cornell Toro type pepper, and it was like this very glossy, just like this perfect, what I thought was a pepper. And she made a lot of these others, and the one I thought we were gonna make. And yeah, the ones that she kind of sketched as she found in the population, was thinking about are just like, is way more interesting, way more fun than we would have created making like that just perfect kind of cookie cutter looking pepper. So in the chinenses and the bacotums, but the chinenses especially right now, you're free to play with all that, and it's just, it's breathtaking. I would actually be interested if Patrice has any comments on that. Increasingly, so one of the things we're interested in, and one of the beautiful parts, and what you saw in Francis and David's stuff, is also there's like an art component. Dan had some really cool ones too, right? So just kind of like what happens to do those crosses and create stuff, combinations that probably have not been on the planet before, haven't been known on the planet. So I know Patrice does a bunch of great stuff with art and plant breeding. I'd actually love to hear something from him.
Hello, hello. Am I there?
Hey, Patrice, you are.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, I'm flattered that you want to see my pepper work, but I live in kind of a strange area for pepper growing. I mean, we're 3 weeks later, farther north. Our spring is 3 weeks later than Montreal. So my pepper growing is kind of marginal. And I've been doing just plain reproduction of varieties that do good for me right now. But it wasn't my intention today to trigger like the new pepper dreams. So of course, it will have to do with precocity. I mean, earliness for sure. But yeah, the number of days to maturity is a big concern for people up north here. So yeah, my main variety for that we feel comfortable with having a good result is Hot Portugal, which is actually an American breed, I hear, but it's the best reliable hot pepper. Not so hot hot pepper. But that's why I'm not commenting much, because I'm playing with other friends right now.
Yeah.
Radishes and beets and stuff.
Thank you. But I was also just in those crops, right? So I think it also informs pepper maybe a little. But so you incorporate art into what you do, right? And so I don't know. I'm curious to know a little bit. Yeah. As I've gone back into the art of pepper, I'm intrigued to know if you have any gems to share about art and plant breeding.
I have no pepper project actually. I have an
but any plant in art, yeah.
Oh wow, this is okay. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay, that's fair. Yep.
We'll have a talk here now.
That's good. Yeah. So I'm thinking as to Simon's question, it's like there's just these commodity roles, these pigeonhole things that we work a lot with beans, and there's so many different varieties of black beans, and commercially things are growing on a massive scale, like all these different varieties, and they all get put in the same bag that says black bean. or black bean variety not stated. If you're getting the seed to plant, it's just like, it's whatever, it's all the same. So there's a lot of the need to be able to put something in that pre-printed bag and just have it blend in that, is kind of really holds us back in the progress we could be making. And I think about how much we celebrate diversity and uniqueness in people, but we have to get all our vegetables to fit into a couple of nice tidy pigeonholes. So we work to break that down. So some of the crosses that we are doing that we're the most excited about, and some of them are up here. You can see any pepper that has like the little divot by the stem. So we explore a lot of heirlooms and figure out what to do with an heirloom, because if something's an heirloom, it's an heirloom because people have really loved it for a long time, right? And so that's kind of lets you know there's the value there in it. So so we're doing crosses where we take some peppers similar to the hot Portugal, take like Jimmy Nardello, and see how that combines with a kind of one of the most recent thoroughbred Corno del Toro types. So things from Vitalis, which they are a sister company of Enza, which is one of the most influential pepper breeding companies I connect with in terms of like kind of global impact on some of the new varieties. And so looking at things like combining like Jimmy Nardello, which is an heirloom with all these great culinary qualities, with the latest and greatest agronomic gains from Vitalis, right? So things that have that, those of you that are like writing that down right now, it's really awesome. Hi, Annie. Make this cross. So, but that's the sort of cross that I really love to do, because it's these two genetic gene pools that haven't seen each other in so long. I guarantee all the pepper breeders at these big companies do not know about the whole Pimented and Mayday sort of story, right? That like chili heads will know right now, right? So there's these two firewalled cultures you can like bring together and create all these cool things. We are playing with looking at the crosses between some similar peppers to what Francis showed, and crossing that with like Habanada and other no heat peppers. In this case, I knew immediately what Dan was talking about when he talked about the fun of going through the field and seeing what peppers are going to be spicy or not. It is an exhilarating experience. The first one you bite into like an apple, the second one you don't. You know, so just working with trying to figure out how to make something that's has all these great qualities and how to make it something that more people can experience and enjoy the experience. Everyone can experience biting into a ghost chili, but so how to kind of expand that. And so we're doing a lot of those crosses. I think the difference we have is, as we're going for these peppers, we know some of the genes, so we know the properties, so we know a cross what will show up in the hybrid or what will be a carrier for what will show up the next generation. With that, we can also go through the seedling stage and have assays to see which plants will express the gene or carry the gene. And so we can sort through a lot faster. They are not 100% accurate. They're as accurate as the person doing the test. It makes me have a whole different perspective on a lot of the virus testing that's going on now, because there's a human error rate to it, and every once in a while I get scorched. Yeah, so you know which students run the best tests, and sometimes you do them yourself. Sometimes the students do it way better. So I think those are some of the fun crosses in Bacatum there's like all the coolest new peppers. So you see stuff like Sugar Rush Peach just kind of erupting on the scene. And a lot of the bacadums are super late. And so some of the earliest bacadums, like the people that grow bacadums tend to grow ají cristal. They don't grow that much because it's hot, but they do grow it's because it's early. And so, you know, crossing that into other bacadums is I think a great way to make bacadums work a lot better for people. So yeah, some of the cool crosses that we're playing with.
Michael, just for
Yeah.
clarification, you were saying that there was a sort of firewall between these two pools of
Yeah.
pepper genes.
Yep.
What distinguishes these two groups, these two pools of germplasm?
A lot. So I'll talk about that one, but I should also talk about it kind of broadly. So one of the things that distinguishes the pools of germplasm is it's just kind of the circles that people maintain. So it's kind of like your network, right? And so if you're a company plant breeder for a large seed company, your network is largely the like-minded people, right? So the same thing like humans and some of the social things we're working on now, at least in the US, you guys maybe too. But you know, you have that network that there's the people that you interact with, and you're really blind to something that's maybe right in front of your nose if it's not in your network. So if you are, so what would typically happen is you'll get some cool pepper seed, you'll start a breeding program. If you're in a company, it's probably going to be your predecessor's material you're going to work with. And you pretty soon will develop some pretty cool things, right? So I know Ontario and the Bell Pepper Project, they've developed some really cool things. And one of the things that happens is as you become familiar with those peppers and you start crossing them together and back and forth, you end up reducing and shrinking your network, right? So that you are crossing the things that you're really excited about together, because there's these varieties that like, man, if I can only improve it a little bit more, this one needs this and this one only needs that. And you start working with those and you stop working with the original breadth. Right, as you get closer to something that's almost perfect, you focus there, and you also look at what your market is. So you have a lot of the big seed companies; they are working on something to be like a very textbook sort of how to breed peppers, and they're going to cross to things that are really similar. If you cross to something weird or different, it's going to take a long time to be able to get something that can go right back in that variety not stated box. Like, so something that like matches a commodity. So the grocery store, the supermarket can just put pepper or tomato. Like you have like grape tomato and you have slicing tomato, and those two tomatoes, right? So, yeah, and then you have like the seed savers and the people that work in these independent networks that I think a lot of us have spent a long time connecting with, where you look at this kind of, rather than corporate knowledge, and this community knowledge, this generational knowledge, and where you're like eating this stuff and you end up with some very different things. Right? To think about it kind of broadly in terms of the globe, if you think about pepper, I'll stay on topic with pepper, is you had a few species that were, you know, North, South America, right? So there's lots of species. If you talk to people in Brazil, there's way more species, but the ones that we can see, they can cross together. We think about for breeding, you know, there's, you know, half a dozen or so. And those got transported like back to like Portugal and Spain and Europe, and then that made it everywhere in the world, right? So you have people got some diversity, what we think about like land races, and they would take that to Hungary, and you ended up getting all these paprikas where there's like all these qualities and the color are really important. If you're going to make your chicken paprikash, it has to be like from this sort of pepper. And you ended up with something like the white to red ripening peppers. They have like way different flavor properties. One of the reasons why Habanada is the color it is because it impacts flavor. And then you watch as one group of these peppers moves down into like through the Middle East and Morocco and the spicy cuisines there, and down into all the way to the tip of Africa. You know, you have all these African bird peppers, and the one I've worked with a fish pepper, the variegated annuum, down into South Africa, where they recently started with all the peppadews, which I'm pretty sure is a bacatum, right? Seems that way. And then as they made it like through China and all and west and east, and you know, is through China into Japan, Korea, and they end up getting fermented and used in so many different ways. So you have all these people encountering a crop for the first time, trying to integrate it into their culture. Their culture is forever changed. Right? You can't think about these cuisines without thinking about these peppers, like Ethiopian cuisine. All these places, like this pepper changed them. They also changed the pepper, right? So Hugh, I think as you led off thinking about the interplay, they also ended up with some diversity that they took, worked with to get some different genetic combinations. Some mutations probably happened there. We lost diversity. So you end up with like these reservoirs of novelty that are linked to a culture. And as we do the genome sequences of like all the crops, I spent a lot of time doing that just to kind of unravel all this, is you find a type of pepper in a location, and you look at the genetic diversity there, you can't really separate like the types of pepper and the location. It goes for a lot of crops where it's kind of where it's from, and if it's terroir, it's like geographical identity tells you so much about what you'll find there and kind of what that culture did when they interacted with that pepper, when they adopted it and made it their own, and it made them how it wanted, if you taste their food. So you can make a lot of progress too, not just by taking it from like corporate to independent and that cultural cross, but you can do geographic regions around the globe. And the people are traveling across the world, trying to experience everyone's culture and understand, but they're not really cross-pollinated. They're crops, and we find beautiful things. There's in the squash world, we have this kogi nut squash that it's a cross between something that has very Japanese kabocha-like qualities and very kind of butternut squash, North America, like this hemisphere sort of qualities. And we brought together these different hemispheres. And I would say hybrid vigor doesn't exist in squash. If you cross between cultures, it does, right? And so I think there's a lot that can happen there.
Awesome. Thanks, thanks, Michael. Are there any other questions from participants? Est-ce que vous avez des questions que vous aimeriez partager avec Michael ou avec d'autres participants? Or are there other people who are doing their own breeding projects and who'd like to talk about that?
I'd love to hear this.
I have a question. This is Tegan from New Brunswick. But just as I've been seed saving for a long time, but in terms of plant breeding, I haven't done very much. And we're similar to Patrice. We're in a very short growing season place. Where would you recommend beginning? I mean, I would love to just we started with just trying to get things ripen in time, right? So yeah. Where should you begin?
Yeah, so I like to suggest people start with looking at, like, if they're going to invest in creating something, make sure that you're going to be investing in creating something that doesn't already exist. What you would have is it's going to be so much of your effort. You want to make sure you're really creating something that's novel and a resource. So what I would, so start by exploring what's out there and be looking for the earliest. You can Google with the genus capsicum, and you'll find some things. Also, just kind of in some of these networks. So one of the peppers that is really early that didn't make it in the list, it didn't do very well. I think Isabella or Hugo was presenting a survey of like looking at all these peppers developed for the Northeast. Earliest red sweet is one that was developed in northern Minnesota. And so it's very short seasons. It doesn't yield a lot of peppers. It ripens, it'll set and ripen really quickly. And it's small, and but that would be a sort of pepper that is kind of really well adapted to that area. And so it's like, how can you find more like it, or how can you find its relatives if you want to cross them and start combining them?
What was the name of the one from Minnesota?
Early red sweet. You might see it as earliest red sweet. The place I've seen it sold, I think, is Turtle Tree Biodynamic in New York. But it's also looking at, so if they can't ripen, should you really be working with pepper, right? So I spent a lot of time working on Moshada squash. It's tropical. I spent a lot of time trying to make it work in the Northeast. It has some attributes that makes it work really well for insect resistance, but I like the taste of it, but it's a tropical squash. If you have a late start to the season, your season ends early, like, what do you have, right? And so you might lose everything because it's just barely squeezing in to the growing days you have. So there's other crops that are adapted to where you are, or Anthony Boutard, Ayers Creek in Oregon, has this big map on his wall. So if you ever get to go there, if you're out from the Organic Seed Growers conferences, he would show you how he looks at the same latitude all around the globe, and he looks to see what do people grow at that latitude all the way around the globe, and picks things that he wants to try. The other thing I think you could do is to look at green peppers, so it won't help your seed saving as much, but if you just save seeds from the beds, you can dig those up and put them on your windowsill to ripen. But if you're just going to get green peppers, then how do you find a green pepper you really love? I think Greta has some really cool ones in that regard. I'm sure, I think other people do. It'd be interesting to see what some of Dan's crosses would taste like. And so I think there's things you can do to get away from that aggressive green flavor in a green pepper, or figure out how you want to use it in your cooking. So I think you can embrace what works.
Thank you.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Tegan?
No, that was great. Thank you very much.
Great. Are there any questions in the last 10 minutes we had with Michael and with some different farms across Quebec, Ontario, and Atlantic Canada?
Some of the folks I would normally hang out with in the summer, I hope we can find another time to do that. So we might not find it here, but it's my let's make sure to connect. Okay.
When does the Pepper Conference usually take place? What time in the year?
It varies a little bit based on where it's going to be, but it's usually September. So it's postponed this year. They'll probably have some, they're supposed to have virtual field tours. They usually have a big variety trial. It's mostly different companies' releases. A lot of them look the same. But you can, it's going to be postponed to September 2021 at Curry Seeds, which is, he is in Arizona, Ed Curry is. He has bred some of the best chili peppers I know. Largely, he recruits a lot of emeritus faculty that are really excited to work with him on his operation. So he has like this dream team of retired pepper breeders working there, helping, providing insight now, working there. And so New Mexico, which prides itself in its chili peppers, has to grow a lot of chili peppers named Arizona in the name. So they're working through that. But so it's a cool place if you want to see peppers on a grand scale, and like machine harvest peppers and things looking at labor and harvest. And so how can you retain your local industry that's important on a lot of levels? One of these, all these labor, everything, everything that's going on in farm labor, ag labor, is impacting your ability to get your chili harvest in. And the harvest labor is like super highly skilled. They're really fast, really gentle with the plants. There's no way any of them, there's no way I could keep up with them. And so what do you do as an alternative? So they're looking at a lot of mechanical harvest and trying to get mechanically harvested peppers, not to displace the workers, but so the farmer doesn't end up with a crop that just kind of languishes in the field and it's gone because they can't get it, picked. So they'll talk about that a lot at the conference.
Hi, I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
This is kind of like a junior question because I'm still not really great with peppers, but I got lots of conflicting information about how much peppers, like how far they actually have to be far apart from each other. So
yeah.
What is your minimum that you find that there's going to be a security for the genetics of the seed? And is there a difference between the hot peppers and the sweet peppers, please?
Yeah, so I think annuum peppers, they all have big flowers and they set pollen in these balls of pollen on the anther. It's really easy to get in bees and travel. The chinenses, tend not to produce much pollen. They'll have a little bit that you kind of do in pollination, you have to scoop out. Those tend not to go as far. The answer, to give you the right answer, is it depends on your bees, right? So Frank Morton does some trainings on his land where he's a lettuce breeder in Oregon, and he thinks about where the bees are kind of coming from, where he sees them going, what other flowers does he have for them to interact with. And so it depends on a lot of the geography where the bees are going. We see a lot of the same with squash, people plant Maxima and Moschata squash, and side by side is seed crops. And it works until it fails miserably, right? So usually one is flowering before the other, and that helps. They're infertile as can be, and so people plant them side by side and have things work out. Other years, it's like what Dan shared with some interspecific crosses in his high tunnel, that I would say that cross basically never happens in nature, and except if you're on Turn to Soul, and then I guess it happens. Right, so we never see it, but it does happen. So part of it is what are the time and spatial isolations you have, and also how critical is it? Are you going to accidentally have some jalapeno cross into your Corno del Toros? and then you'll sell that seed. I would be scared with that one. The other way, you're probably okay. But so I think it's looking at your risk also helps you determine it.
Ça répond à ta question, Téprine?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Any last questions out there?
No. Let's say some of the, if while people are thinking of some of the books I recommend, if you don't already have, Carol Deppy's Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties. And if you go to circulate the link around, it's a hard copy and ebook. I found this kind of late in my teaching genetics. I teach basically the same as this book in my class. This is a great resource with some anecdotes and things to keep it interesting, but otherwise her process and the steps and how she lays out the chapter is exactly what I recommend. If you read that and you want to get technical, The Principles of Genetics, this book by Aqua, is, we can help work with Hugo to send that out, is the one that really gets into the quantitative genetic stuff at kind of like undergraduate level. So it's not like grad student level, totally inaccessible, but it will stretch you a bit, and you can think about quantitative genetics and other things too. And yeah, and some of the things about the technical, if we want to have a follow-up sometime about talking about the technical, I think that's probably the main part I can contribute to this group that probably surpasses me in many other ways. But on the technical, if we want to have a follow-up sometime, I'd be down for that.
Great, thanks. Patrice, tu voulais dire quelque chose?
Non, je crois pas.
Non, ok. Je voyais ton micro qui s'était unmuté. Great, thank you, Michael, and everyone for joining in this webinar. You can stay in touch with us by contacting some of the regional coordinators. We drafted some fact sheets on pepper selection that will complement with some of the information that Michael shared, and you're most welcome to read these fact sheets and send us your feedback and how you would want to see them improve. Ils sont aussi disponibles en français. There's also a sort of training needs questionnaire that you can fill, and we hope to see you at the next webinar, which will be on carrots, September 16th. Thank you, and we'll also be sharing a brief video on hand pollination that was done at a farm a month ago. So Michael, thank you so much, and David, Francis, Dan, Isabel, Rebecca, Annie, Catherine, and everyone who joined in. I wish you a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good harvest, everyone.